The lights of Studio 8G were glowing in that signature late-night warmth. Cameras swiveled. A live audience of about 150 people buzzed with the easy laughter that always fills the room during a taping of Late Night with Seth Meyers. This was supposed to be a safe, comfortable space for celebrity charm, a few safe jokes, and maybe a quick anecdote about life behind the scenes in Hollywood. But at exactly 11:42 p.m. Eastern Time, the entire tone of the show shifted, permanently. But before we continue, please subscribe, like, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Pete Davidson, lanky in a vintage hoodie and flashing his familiar half-smirk, leaned forward in his chair and let slip the kind of statement that stops conversations, kills laughter, and sends producers into silent panic mode. The words came out so casually that, for a split second, it seemed like a joke. But there was no punchline, only a quiet, stunned pause that stretched across the studio. I mean, Pete began. It's not like we were trying to hide it or anything. Meghan and I, we had a thing. While she was married to Harry. It was the kind of moment that doesn't feel real until you watch it back later on a loop. Audience members blinked, mouths falling open. Seth Meyers froze for just long enough that you could almost hear the mental gears turning. Should he push for details? Should he change the subject? Should he laugh it off? The studio's control room reportedly erupted into frantic whispers, producers gesturing wildly at the stage manager, wondering if a commercial break could be cued early. In the corner, a woman in the front row covered her mouth in disbelief. Someone else let out a sharp, nervous laugh, quickly drowned out by the awkward hush. And then, just as quickly, Pete kept talking, filling the silence with that trademark, slightly mumbling delivery, almost as if he hadn't just detonated a cultural grenade in front of millions. It didn't take long for the clip to start spreading. By the time the East Coast had gone to bed, TikTok was already ablaze with slowed-down replays of the moment, viewers dissecting Pete's body language like forensic analysts. On X, formerly Twitter, the hashtag Pete and Meghan rocketed into trending territory before sunrise. The British tabloids were waking up to an early Christmas gift, a scandal that tied together a Hollywood bad boy, a duchess already mired in controversy, and the simmering drama of the royal family. But let's back up for a moment, because understanding the sheer magnitude of what Pete Davidson just said requires understanding both the man who said it and the woman at the heart of the storm. Pete, of course, is no stranger to attention. His relationships, Ariana Grande, Kim Kardashian, Emily Ratajkowski, have been dissected in public with forensic obsession. He's cultivated an image of chaotic honesty, the kind of celebrity who will admit to awkward truths on live television and then walk away as if nothing happened. That unpredictability is his brand. Meghan Markle, on the other hand, has spent the better part of the last 7 years fighting for control over her public image. Since marrying Prince Harry in 2018, she has alternated between global admiration and relentless tabloid criticism. She and Harry stepped away from royal duties, built a life in Montecito, and positioned themselves as humanitarian storytellers. But with that high profile comes high stakes. Every whisper, every rumor, every offhand comment gets magnified into global headlines. So when Pete Davidson, a man known for blurring the line between comedy and confession, looked into the camera and implied a romantic connection with Meghan during her marriage to Harry, the shockwaves were immediate and brutal. It wasn't just about the claim itself. It was about timing, about credibility, about the unspoken rule that certain subjects, particularly royal marriages, are untouchable unless you have proof. The beginning of this story is about that collision, the exact point where Pete's irreverent, unfiltered style smashed headlong into the fortress of royal image-making. The middle of this introduction is about the reaction. The studio chaos, the lightning-fast spread of the clip online, the mounting questions no one seemed willing to answer. And by the end of this opening chapter, we're going to get to the real reason this moment matters far beyond late-night gossip. Because, for Meghan and Harry, this is not just another headline. This is potentially a fracture in the very foundation of their carefully built life outside the royal palace. For now, picture the scene in Montecito that same night. The Sussexes' sprawling $14 million estate sits silent under the California moonlight. Inside, somewhere past the rose gardens and the security gates, There's a good chance Harry and Meghan's phones were lighting up with texts and missed calls. Maybe Meghan saw the clip before Harry did. Maybe Harry's phone rang first, a concerned friend telling him to check social media immediately. Maybe, just maybe, they were sitting together, scrolling in disbelief, watching Pete's words play out in real time. What we do know is that, by morning, British breakfast television had Pete's face on every screen. The headlines were relentless. Pete Davidson drops royal affair bombshell. Comedian claims romance with Duchess. Meghan in new storm as Hollywood star speaks out. The Daily Mail ran a split-screen image of Pete and Meghan, side by side, with the caption, "Scandal in the spotlight." For those who tuned in late, here's why this is so combustible. Royal scandals have always carried a special weight. They're not just about personal relationships. They're about legacy, tradition, and the perception of stability in an institution that has weathered centuries of drama. Add to that Meghan's already contentious public narrative, and you have the perfect conditions for a controversy that burns hotter than anything we've seen from the Sussex camp in months. But here's the twist. No one knows if Pete was joking, exaggerating, or dead serious, and that uncertainty is what keeps this story alive. In comedy, timing is everything. In scandal, ambiguity is oxygen. Pete gave the world both at once. By the end of this introduction, I want you to feel what the studio audience felt in that moment. Not just surprise, but the creeping realization that something had shifted. Because whether Pete was telling the truth or spinning a story, Meghan Markle's name is now linked, in millions of minds, to a narrative she can't fully control. And for someone who has fought so hard to manage her image, that might be the most damaging part of all. This is not just a celebrity confession. This is a collision of two media ecosystems, the unscripted chaos of late-night television and the meticulously choreographed performance of modern royalty. What happens next could reshape not just Meghan and Harry's personal lives, but the way the public consumes and reacts to royal news in the digital age. And we're only just getting started. The hours immediately after Pete Davidson's remark unfolded like a perfect case study in how modern scandals are born. By 1:15 a.m. Eastern Time, the official NBC YouTube upload of the late-night segment had quietly been edited, cutting Pete's most damning line entirely. But it was already far too late. Clips recorded directly from TV, grainy smartphone replays, and even slowed-down audio were spreading across the internet like wildfire. In an age where a single TikTok can outrun corporate media, no network has the ability to fully erase a moment once it's been captured. The early commenters were split between disbelief and glee. Some insisted Pete was joking and that anyone believing otherwise was gullible. Others began posting old paparazzi photos, searching for evidence that Meghan and Pete had been in the same place at the same time. One viral tweet simply read, "Meghan Markle and Pete Davidson? 2024 just keeps delivering." That combination of humor and suspicion is the perfect fuel for an online scandal. It invites people to join the investigation, to play detective, to dig deeper. Meanwhile, in London, the story hit breakfast shows with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. Hosts who normally traded in polite gossip about royal engagements were suddenly debating the credibility of an American comedian. ITV's Good Morning Britain had the clip on repeat, the presenters openly arguing about whether Meghan's camp would issue a legal threat. Across the Atlantic, morning shows in the U.S. scrambled to book royal commentators, media analysts, and even former palace staff to weigh in. And then came the British tabloids, the most seasoned scandal merchants in the game. Within hours, headlines screamed in all caps. The Sun leaned into its typical sensationalism with, "MEG bomb. Hollywood's bad boy claims he had fling with Duchess." The Daily Mail was more strategic, framing the story as a shocking claim made by a comedian known for blurring truth and fiction. A neat way to print the allegation while keeping a sliver of plausible deniability. The story's magnetic pull comes from two forces working in perfect tandem: Pete's unpredictability and Meghan's polarizing public image. On his side, you have a man whose career is built on shock value, whose audience expects him to overshare, and whose past relationships have been headline fodder for years. On her side, you have a duchess whose every move is dissected, whose supporters fiercely defend her, and whose critics are always looking for a fresh reason to attack. That's a combustible mix, and the match has already been lit. But here's where the introduction moves from spectacle to stakes. This isn't just a juicy Hollywood meets royalty headline. For Harry and Meghan, the implications are layered and dangerous. The couple's multimillion-dollar brand is built on their perceived authenticity, the image of a loving, united front against the pressures of both royal life and media intrusion. If the public starts to believe that image is fractured, the consequences go far beyond hurt feelings. Brand partnerships, speaking engagements, media deals, everything they've built since stepping back from royal duties, rests on the stability of their relationship. Imagine, for a moment, the tension inside that Montecito estate when the story first reached them. Meghan's team, known for tightly managing her press exposure, would have moved instantly, calls to lawyers, crisis PR consultants on standby. Harry, fiercely protective yet known for his emotional reactions, might have been torn between ignoring the claim and confronting it head-on. Every decision in those first hours matters because the longer a story like this circulates without a rebuttal, the more oxygen it gets. The palace, for its part, would likely keep its distance. Since Harry and Meghan stepped down as senior royals, Buckingham Palace has adopted a careful stance. They're not responsible for Sussex-related scandals, but they'll quietly monitor any story that threatens to touch the broader royal brand. Behind closed doors, courtiers will be weighing whether Pete's claim is too ridiculous to dignify or too potentially damaging to ignore. And here's the most intriguing part. Pete hasn't walked his statement back. "No, I was just joking." No clarification through a publicist. No tweets to soften the blow. In an industry where most celebrities move fast to control the narrative, Pete has done the opposite. He's left the allegation hanging in the air, like a bad smell that refuses to dissipate. Whether by design or by accident, that silence makes the claim feel more dangerous. This is where we have to address the audience directly. You might be thinking, it's Pete Davidson. Of course he's kidding. But consider this, Pete's comedic persona often mixes self-deprecating humor with dead serious admissions. His on-stage confessions about addiction, mental health, and breakups were all initially assumed to be bits, until later interviews confirmed they were true. The possibility that this is another of those half-truths wrapped in humor moments is what keeps people talking. As the introduction draws to its end, we're left with an unshakable sense that something significant has been set in motion. Even if Pete was lying or exaggerating, the claim itself now exists in the public consciousness. That's the power of live television and viral media. A single sentence can become a cultural flashpoint overnight. And for Meghan Markle, whose life has been shaped by public perception since her royal debut, this is not just another news cycle. It's a battle for control over her own narrative. The lights in Studio 8G have long since gone dark. The audience has gone home. Pete Davidson is probably sleeping soundly, his phone buzzing with texts from friends both amused and horrified. In Montecito, the mood is likely very different. Phones still in hand, minds racing with strategies, the quiet California night broken only by the faint hum of crisis calls being made. This is where our story begins, not with a royal engagement or a charity gala, but with a late-night throwaway line that may change everything.